There's something very important happening right now that has to do with the way in which our Mother, the Earth, is waking up in us. We are all cells of the life of our Mother, the Earth. And she is ailing, she is very sick. And that has to do because the world of utility has taken over. And instead of seeing the universe as a romance between God and the divine presence immanent in creation, people have only seen the dollar signs on everything that's in nature. The Ba'al Shem Tov was so different than other teachers of his day. They were studying the texts that were in books, and they were so smart about those texts, they were able to find the very fine finesses between one statement and another statement, and do a kind of, how would I say, philosophical building that they called pilpul, sharp divisions between one idea and another idea, and that all led to cleverness, but it didn't lead to wisdom. The Ba'al Shem, on the other hand, did not study at any of these schools. He lived and studied from nature. And so he got to understand, when people would say he knew the voices, he could hear the speech of birds and of the trees, which is not that they were speaking in human language. It means that he had tuned in to the frequency where they were communicating. Most people don't believe that plants can communicate with each other, but that's precisely what is happening. Aspens know that, other plants know that they communicate with each other. And so it is with all the other species, because we couldn't be in communication, in community without communication. So the Ba'al Shem Tov knew that. Not too long ago, I had the opportunity to go, when I returned from the wedding of my son in Israel, I stopped off at Kiev. And there, with my other son, we went on a journey, and this driver took us to the various graves of the holy people who lived at that time. Being the grandfather, if you will, of Jewish renewal, my job has been also to bring about an understanding of Hasidism in a new way, because I call it the fourth turning of Hasidism. There are some people who would say that this is not genuine and that this is sort of a modern invention and it doesn't really belong. So being at the grave of the Ba'al Shem Tov, when you come to the grave of a holy person, you want to make yourself very receptive to the vibrations that come from there. And I wanted to be able to graft Jewish renewal and this Hasidism that we have onto the tree of the Ba'al Shem Tov. And it came to me that the Ba'al Shem Tov was saying, every once in a while, people forget that God sends down loving influence, life into the world, and the people who are in charge of a religion want to dam it up. They want to get a lot of mileage out for that religious establishment in which they are in charge. So they had dammed it up so much so that most of the simple people who needed access to the divine juice, if you will, couldn't do that anymore, because they had dammed it up. So the Ba'al Shem Tov said, so what did I do? I dug underneath the dam to allow for that thing to flow again. And he said to me, you have done the same thing too, because people have come and have taken Judaism and made it so mechanical, and only for people who were of a particular kind. And you see the various kinds of religious politics in which the people who are the ultra-Orthodox in Jerusalem, for instance, want to be able to call the shots for all of us. And so they have taken and dammed up that flow that comes from God that should give us life and enjoyment and ecstasy. And so the Ba'al Shem Tov said, and you also dug underneath the dam, and for this I recognize you. And that was very much of what my particular personal experience with the Ba'al Shem has been. Well, it's very clear. The clearest example is when the Ba'al Shem Tov was saying, imagine you're in the middle of prayer, and all of a sudden there arises in your mind the image of a nude woman, and it seems to want to distract you from your prayer. You must remember that this is a stimulus to think of the source of beauty and take it up to a higher realm and recognize that there is a feminine divine aspect which is very, very beautiful and very attractive, and then to express that in prayer. 2 generations later, Reb Shneya Zalman says, if you get such an image arising in you, remove it quickly from your mind, because most of you will not have the ability to raise it to such a high level. And that has something to do with how much trust we have in people. The Ba'al Shem Tov once said, and it was reported by his disciple Yaakov Yosef of Polanoev, that the Ba'al Shem Tov said, they revealed to me from heaven that one of the reasons why the Messiah is tarrying and coming is because people do not spend enough time in the mystery of kisses before the great union, before the great love. So you can see where the Ba'al Shem Tov was with this. And before he died, he said, it is too bad that my wife no longer is alive, because had she been alive, then we would have been able to go up alive in a chariot to heaven. You can imagine how he had a sense of that when husband and wife are together, it's not that there are 2 there, there are 3 there. And then the 3 merge into the 1, and that was a whole other thing. And they were really afraid to tell this to people, because the temptations that were around were very great, and they thought the more we can protect people in the enclave, the better it'll be. What they didn't know was how many people slipped out of the enclave and did what their bodies demanded of them. You want to read Isaac Bashevis Singer and his stories, you get to see that for all the denial in the shtetl that there was sexuality, you can see as he tells the stories of what was taking place. Well, her father had met the Ba'al Shem Tov, liked him a great deal, and told him that he has a daughter and he would like him to marry his daughter, and they wrote out an engagement contract. The brother of the one who was to become his bride was a greatly learned Talmud scholar and of high pedigree, and he certainly didn't want his sister to marry this guy who looked like a peasant, because the Ba'al Shem Tov didn't put on airs at that time when he was young. So he said to the Ba'al Shem Tov first, how can I pay you off so that you can rescind on the contract? And the Ba'al Shem Tov said to him, let me talk to your sister. And the 2 of them went into another room, out of earshot, but within sight, and the Ba'al Shem Tov said something to her, whereupon she came out of the room and she said, I'll marry this man. All my life I've been so curious what that conversation was about, because he must have said something to her that told her heart that this was her really bashert, the person with whom she should spend life. There is a picture around, and they claim that that's the picture of the Ba'al Shem Tov. There was a Ba'al Shem in London, and his name was, with the last name Falk, And that's not the picture of the Ba'al Shem Tov. If you ask me what I think what he looked like, I'll tell you a story. That's a story from the Midrash way back. When Moses was still alive on earth, there was a king who had heard about Moses' great capacity. So he sent a painter to make a picture of Moses. The painter came, made a good portrait of Moses, and came back with that portrait, and the king looked at that portrait and said, "That person with those features, that is the great Moses, I can't believe it." And he sent a philosopher to check. And when he came back, the philosopher said, "Moses, oh, so great, so wonderful. Not only did he study in the greatest schools in Egypt, but he's also in connection with the living God, and he receives revelations, and he is very wise," and so on and so forth. The king takes the portrait and says, "Is that what he looks like?" And he says, "Yes." The king says, "I can't understand it. I got to go myself and see." So he comes to see Moses, and he sees the painter did a good picture, and the philosopher did a good report. So he asks Moses, "How come with this face, this who you are?" So Moses said, "You should see what I came in with." And that still shows on my face. However, I had to work very, very hard to overcome all these things. Now, I think we don't see here that the Ba'al Shem Tov was particularly cute as a child, that people wanted to adopt him and rear him. In fact, there were sort of good riddance with him when he went with the secret saint along and he gave him his instructions. So there is this beautiful statement in Isaiah 53 that talking about the Messiah, the son of Joseph, the suffering Messiah, that he was not very beautiful to behold. I think that's there. However, now I want to go to the other side. Being there at that point at the graveside, there impressed itself a picture of him. And the laughing eyes were there, and the lines in his face were not of worry, but of joy. And there was, even if he did not look so pretty, there he was beautiful. And I think that's what I want to say about him. He was not as tall as the Maggid of Mezrich, people say. Some people have said that his hair was reddish, something like King David's hair. I don't know more about that. I have a sense that he was muscular, because when he dug clay, and that's how he made his living. I also have a sense that the fact that he walked long distances on his own feet, and that he dipped in icy water in the middle, that he had a robust body. And so these are the things that I visualize about the Ba'al Shem Tov.